Let me first position it in the contradiction of the concept that we face today in society, and then position it in the civic outworking of it. I was at Ohio State University doing an open line radio program with Hugh Ross, the astrophysicist. And a woman phoned rather angrily, and let me pause and say, I understand why they feel this way, because I have been on other ends of the position where if people did not understand me, that sense of pent-up frustration, and I know why she was upset. The only thing is none of us had ever mentioned the issue. She brought up the abortion issue, and she said, all you Christians are about is that hidden agenda, and you're just using all of this in order to accomplish that. I said, ma'am, we haven't even talked about it. I don't know why you say that. And the idea of a hegemony and all was introduced. I said, you have just brought in a subject matter that is not even being addressed in the open forums, because to me that's as serious as it is. It's a symptomatic issue of the ideas that we live with. We wrestle with the ideas. The particulars and the symptoms are many, not just one. I said, but seeing you brought this question up, I'd like to ask you a question. I said, why are you for it? And she said, it is my moral right. I said, all right, then respond to me this way. I said, many times I stand on a university campus and somebody gives me an illustration like this. A plane is in midair, suddenly it crashes, seemingly for no reason, it explodes, and strangely 10 people live, 70 people die. It's an act of God, according to the proverbial usage. And people say to me, what kind of a God is this? 70 die, 10 live. God is immoral in doing that. I said, now can you help solve this conundrum for me? If indeed that is an act of God, and 70 die and 10 live, and He made that choice for it to happen, you're calling His choice immoral. I said, when you have the opportunity to determine whether somebody lives within you or dies within you, you're calling it your moral right. I said, can you explain this conundrum for me? There was silence. We have to ask some very hard questions. I have written a paper that I'll be glad to present these options. There are only 4 possible options with what that child is in the mother's womb, as far as I know. That is something like it is alive and you don't know it. It is alive and you do know it. It is not alive and you don't know it. It is not alive and you do know it. Take those 4 options, and the best you can come out with is the possibility of criminal negligence, i.e., if you don't know where your 2-year-old boy is on a farm, would you go around with a pitchfork jamming it into a haystack, see if he's hiding there? Why? You would not want to risk hurting him. Now, having said that, the hardest thing for the Christian, and for me, I speak now personally, to me it's a very treasured thing that this life is so sacred and so vulnerable. It is not the mother's life, it is not the father's life. Geneticists tell you that. From the moment of that conception, this is a brand new entity. I do not know of geneticists anywhere who have said this is not a life. This is a completely different entity. I think what the world has to answer is, what are we going to do if that is a life and we are taking them up by the millions? What are we going to do if that is indeed a life and we are destroying them by the millions? Now, somebody can then turn around and say, Ravi, this is a pluralistic society. You have no right to impose your ethic upon me. I accept that statement in 99 out of 100 times. Where I have the quandary is this: if indeed my responsibility in life is to guard the sanctity of another life, ought not I to do my best to protect that life too? How do we go about in a democratic society? Here is the hardest way for us to accept, I'm afraid. It is this: to change society from top down is always a temptation. But to change society the slow way of changing the hearts of men and women so that they will change the laws of the land is the way Christ has, I think, operated in history. As difficult as that is, and I know it's a divisive statement, I will do everything in my power to talk to every human being about the sanctity of that life. But I also recognize in a society where the person next to me has that freedom to make his or her decision, Jesus moved through the slow way of rebuilding a life. That's why there were many societal issues he did not directly address, because he wanted to change the heart of man. And let us never forget, he gave them a perfect law, and the country still went wild without a vision, went berserk. So that ultimately it is only the change of heart that can change society. You see, we can be very moral and still be morally lost. Jesus Christ did not come into this world to make bad people good. He came into this world to make dead people live. Those who were dead to God to be made alive to Him. We'll take that as the last one, ma'am.
Okay, hey. Thank you very much for letting me ask you a question, and also just for coming, because I really appreciate it a lot. If God created man the way that He created us each individually, and He knows, obviously, what He made in us, because He made us, and He created the environment that we're in, and that environment sort of has an influence on our decisions and stuff, and there is predestination in the Bible, then if He gave us free will, how do we really have free will if we're like the objects of His creation?
This two poles of God's sovereignty and human responsibility. It is only a contradiction if the sovereignty is so absolute that the free will is purely in name, or it is only a contradiction if there is total sovereignty and total freedom. The fact of the matter is there isn't. Our freedom is not absolute. Our freedom is limited. There are certain parameters within which we have the freedom. It is not an absolute freedom. And God in His sovereignty has chosen to give us that limited freedom. So He is still absolutely sovereign. But let me therefore just take these two issues of God's sovereignty and human responsibility and position it the way the Bible does. It is this. The Apostle Paul says, for example, work out your own salvation, freedom of will. For it is God that worketh in you both to will and to do of His good pleasure, sovereignty of God. Work out your own salvation, responsibility of humanity. For it is God that worketh in you both to will and to do of His good pleasure, sovereignty of God. You hear this in Jesus' words. Offenses must come, sovereignty of God. But woe unto him through whom they come, responsibility of man. The Apostle Peter at his sermon in Pentecost says this, that which God hath foreordained from before the foundation of the world, sovereignty of God, you with wicked hands have taken and crucified, responsibility of man. God holds these 2 points in tension for us. And I believe it is a marvelous tension in which we need to hold it. Because every day I know I am totally dependent upon His sovereignty. But at the same time, it is not a debilitating sovereignty that takes away responsibility from me. When William Carey was going to go to India as a missionary, somebody stood up and said, if he wants them saved, he can have them saved without you. That is true. But that does not mean he has not chosen to use human instrumentality. So let us recognize that the Bible gives us these 2 points and enables us to hold them in tension. And they are not contradictory concepts because the sovereignty has granted the freedom and the freedom is limited. I cannot take the freedom to create other options. For example, I cannot say that I can reject Christ and still be eternally in heaven. That's not an option for me. There is a limited effect there's a limited choice I have. The effects are built into those choices. So I've very plainly said, that with God had joined together, let no man put asunder. He has taught us that He is sovereign. He has reminded us that we have a responsibility. Let me give you one simple illustration and then I'll be seated. And I will get my hair turning black again after this, the strain of these several days. I was visiting the city of Varanasi in India, which is a magnificent Hindu city. It is old and all of that, but it's known for its silk saris, the best silk saris in the world. In fact, all generally wedding saris are bought from Varanasi. Growing up there, you'd say, they used to call it Banarasi silk sari. I saw how they are made. I'd never seen them until that point. It's generally made by a father and son team. The Father sits on a platform, 2 steps below sits the Son. Every 2 minutes or so, he'll gather a combination of these threads, hold them together, and he'll nod, and the Son sitting 2 steps below will move the shuttle from the right to the left. He gets another set of threads, nods, the Son moves it from the left to the right. The only thing the Son does is respond to the nod of the Father, right to left, left to right. The entire pattern is in the mind of the Father, and as it unfolds, you see the pattern that is being designed in His mind. The Son is just moving the shuttle right to left. Does not take too much to do that, but thankfully He does, and He delights in the pattern that He sees emerging. That's our relationship to God. When we stand before Him, we will see the magnificent pattern that was in His mind, and we'll just say, but for the grace of God, I would never have been here. So respond to His revealed word and move when He asks you to move, stop when He asks you to stop. The best way is to live with that moral law. He will build a beautiful pattern. God bless you. Thank you.